Chapter 1. The First Corpse. The fog rolled in like a living thing, swallowing the gaslight until the streets of Whitechapel glowed like dying embers. Inspector Jonathan Harrow pulled his collar tight against the wet chill as he stepped through the throng of gawkers gathered at the mouth of Shadwell Alley. "Move along," he barked, voice muffled in the thick air. Few obeyed. Some wore the frozen expressions of terror, others a sick curiosity. London had seen its share of blood, but not like this. Never like this. Constable Moore waited at the edge of the alley, pale as candle wax, a stained kerchief pressed to his mouth. "You'll want to brace yourself, sir," he said. Harrow pushed past him. The corpse lay sprawled against the soot-blackened bricks, arms and legs bent at unnatural angles as if thrown aside by some monstrous, careless hand. What remained of her dress hung in ribbons, soaked through with blood in a thin, oily slime that stank of iron and rot. But it was her face, or what was left of it, that made Harrow stop cold. The skin had been peeled away from the skull in long, careful strips, revealing grinning teeth and bulging yellowed eyes that stared skyward in permanent terror. Strange symbols had been carved into her cheeks and forehead, twisting, jagged things that seemed almost to shift when viewed too long, as if the very lines writhed against reality. Worse still, her chest cavity was open, ribs broken outward like the petals of a monstrous flower. The heart was gone. In its place, something pulsed, a lump of black, spongy tissue throbbing faintly with a life of its own, steaming in the cold. Harrow forced himself to step closer. His boots crunched over shards of bone scattered like broken glass. The mist thickened, and for a moment he thought he heard something, a whisper at the edge of hearing, a wet, slithering sound, like hands dragging across brick. He shook it off. Delirium. Fog tricks. "Any witnesses?" he asked through gritted teeth. Moore hesitated. "A woman, sir. Raving. Says she saw a creature." Harrow grunted. Whitechapel was full of lunatics. Still he crouched by the body, pulling his gloves tighter. Something about the markings. They weren't random. They were deliberate, repetitive, almost ritualistic. He glanced up at the alley walls. More symbols were scratched into the brickwork, spiraling upward like a grotesque staircase for the damned. And then he saw it. A smear higher up, almost at the second-floor window. A handprint, far too large to be human, with too many fingers, pressed deep into the soot. Harrow straightened slowly, heart hammering. This was no ordinary murder. No ripper, no jealous lover. This was something else. Something that had come in with the fog. And it was still hungry. Chapter 2. An Impossible Witness. The witness sat huddled against a crumbling wall at the constable's station, wrapped in a moth-eaten shawl that stank of mildew and cheap gin. Her name, if she remembered it, was Elsie Mott. Her eyes darted constantly, like a rat expecting the boot. Inspector Harrow watched her from the doorway for a moment. She muttered under her breath, hands fluttering in strange patterns across her chest. Protection? A prayer? A ward against whatever nightmares she believed she'd seen? He stepped inside, boots heavy against the floorboards. "Tell me," he said, voice low and hard, "what you saw." Elsie's eyes flicked up to him, pale blue and broken like cracked porcelain. "It weren't no man," she rasped. "No man could move like that." Harrow said nothing, let the silence push her onward. "It come from the mist," she whispered. Like the mist birthed it. First, it was just a shadow. Tall, thin, no feet to walk with, no face to speak of. Just eyes, shining, grinning. She gagged, pulling the shawl tighter. I seen it grab her, quick as a blink. She didn't even scream, just floated, like a puppet on a string. Tears cut clean lines down her filthy cheeks. And then it pulled something out of her. Not her heart, no, something smaller, brighter. It pulled it right through her chest. Harrow's stomach twisted. And the markings? He pressed. Elsie's hands began twitching again, tracing mad, swirling shapes in the air. Swarmy. Burned into her. I seen it. Symbols, alive, crawling under her skin like worms. She sobbed, then hissed. You think I'm mad? You think I'm drunk? But you'll see. It's still out there, hiding in the smoke. Harrow leaned back, studying her. There were details here, details that hadn't been made public. The removed heart, the strange symbols, the fact that the body hadn't bled out the way it should have, as if something had cauterized the wounds from the inside. Either Elsie Mott had been present at the time of death, or something worse was happening. He stepped out into the car to where Constable Moore waited, shifting from foot to foot like a guilty schoolboy. Keep her here, Harrow ordered. No visitors, no questions. I'll return after I see the other scene. Moore frowned. Another scene, sir? Aye, Harrow said grimly. There's been a second body. The fog outside was thicker now, a damp, yellowed blanket that muffled the city's cries. It clung to Harrow as he stepped back onto the street, heavy, almost oily against his skin. As he pulled his coat tighter, he thought he caught movement out of the corner of his eye, a lurching shadow deeper in the mist. When he turned to look, there was nothing but the fog, swirling slow and greedy around his boots. Somewhere, deep in the city's infected heart, something laughed. Chapter 3. The Book of Smoke. The bookseller's shop leaned crookedly between two abandoned butcher stalls off Gutter Lane, its windows so smeared with grime that the gaslight inside barely escaped. The hand-painted sign above the door had long since rotted away, leaving only a few blackened letters. C-T-H-S. Harrow pushed the door open. A tarnished bell overhead let out a single, broken note. Inside, the air was suffocating. Not just the stink of mold and rotting paper, something else. Something sour and ancient, like the breath of a crypt. Inspector Harrow, croaked a voice from the darkness between the stacks. The bookseller emerged, a hunched figure wrapped in a moth-bitten coat several sizes too large. His face was a nest of wrinkles, his eyes watery and rimmed with red. Fingers like bird claws fluttered nervously as he spoke. I heard you were asking questions, he said, about them. Harrow didn't waste time. Symbols, murders, things moving in the fog, he said. What do you know? The bookseller grinned, a sick, twisted thing that showed too many teeth. I know you're too late, he whispered, but maybe you'll want to see this. He shuffled behind the counter and returned with a thin, crumbling volume wrapped in oilcloth. He handled it like a live rat, thrusting it into Harrow's hands with visible relief. The cover was black, blistered with water damage, but the title was still legible in flaking gold. The Book of Smoke. Harrow cracked. The pages were brittle and stank of mildew. Drawings covered every surface, spirals, malformed beasts with too many limbs, diagrams of human anatomy twisted into grotesque parodies. One passage caught his eye, scrawled in a tight, frantic hand. The mind-eaters come before the blood runs cold, slipping between the folds of sight. They drink thought, they gnaw at memory, they feast on the spark of knowing. The air harbinger is the fog that thinks. Their god is named Iquaroth. As Harrow read, the words seemed to pulse on the page, swimming, forcing their way into his brain like worms burrowing through soft earth. He slammed the book shut, nausea rising. You think this is a game? He growled. You think this is some penny dreadful trick? The bookseller only laughed, a dry, cracking sound. "I think you're already breathing it," he said, voice low and trembling. "The fog. It's not weather. It's him. It's his body, his mind. The more you see, the more you belong to him." Harrow turned to leave, disgusted, but the bookseller caught his sleeve with desperate fingers. "You'll dream of the spirals," he hissed. "You'll wake up wrong, and when you do, don't look in the mirror." Outside, the mist was thicker than ever, boiling and churning over the cobbles. Harrow stuffed the book of smoke into his coat and set off into the gloom, his mind pounding. He told himself it was nonsense, superstition, the ravings of the insane. But as he walked, he realized something horrifying. He couldn't remember which way he'd come. The streets twisted around him in impossible ways, alleys opening and closing like breathing mouths. Every lamp seemed farther away than the last, and the shadows were moving, not from the flicker of flame. They moved because they wanted to. Chapter 4. The Surgeon's Secret. The morgue at St. Erasmus Hospital smelled worse than any slaughterhouse. A choking blend of formaldehyde, sour meat, and something subtler, the faint metallic stink of old terror. Inspector Harrow stood over the slab, coat open, scarf pulled tight around his face. The body laid out before him was worse than the first. Much worse. The second victim was a man, mid-30s, once broad and strong. Now he was a ruin. His rib cage had been shattered outward, jagged bones shredding the skin like paper. Where the heart should have been was a hole, perfectly round, the edges blackened and dry, as if something had drank the organ from the inside. But that wasn't the worst of it. Dr. Thaddeus Crisp, the morgue's chief surgeon, pulled back the scalp with gloved fingers, exposing the skull. The cranium had been cracked like an egg. Brain inside was gone. No blood, no trauma, no sign of extraction. Just a hollow space lined with a greasy black film that glistened under the morgue's jaundiced lights. "Impossible," Harrow muttered. Chris shrugged, his face an unreadable mask. "I've seen men split apart in the wars. I've stitched children back together after they were run down in the streets. But this," he pointed at the empty skull, "outer. This wasn't done by blade, or bullet, or fire." He leaned in closer, voice dropping to a whisper. "It's as if the mind itself was plucked out, not just the flesh, the soul, if you believe in such things." Harrow's hands clenched into fists. "This isn't natural," he said. "No," Crisp agreed. "And it isn't alone." He gestured to a side table covered by a stained white sheet. Harrow stepped closer and pulled the cloth aside. Another body, but this one, wrong. At first glance it looked human, 2 arms, 2 legs, a face. But the details were wrong, almost lazily assembled. The joints bent in directions they shouldn't. The skin was translucent in places, webbed with greenish veins that pulsed faintly, as if something inside was still alive. Its eyes, 4 of them, stacked 2 atop 2, stared blindly upward. Milk-white and weeping, a viscous black fluid. "I found this in the Thames 2 nights ago," Crisp said. "Fished out near Limehouse docks. No one wanted to touch it. They say the water boiled around it." He crossed himself, trembling. "I cut it open. Regretted it instantly." "What did you find?" Harrow asked, though a part of him screamed not to. Crisp swallowed hard. There wasn't blood, only smoke, thick and black and cold. It poured out of it like a bleeding wound, and whispered." Harrow stiffened. "Whispered?" Crisp nodded. "Not in any language I know, but it spoke all the same. Promises, warnings." He gripped Harrow's arm with sudden strength. "You're chasing ghosts you can't catch, Inspector. They aren't killing us for sport. They're harvesting. A heavy silence filled the room. Then, somewhere deep within the hospital, a bell rang, not loud, but shrill and panicked. A nurse rushed in, face white as paper. "Dr. Crisp?" she gasped. It's in your office. Sir, you must come at once." Without a word, Crisp tore off his apron and hurried out, Harrow close behind. The hallways twisted in unnatural ways, corridors folding into each other. It felt as though the building itself was shifting underfoot, rebelling against reason. They reached the door to Crisp's office. Bolin. It hung open. Inside, the surgeon's instruments floated in midair, spinning lazily, scalpels, forceps, needles, orbiting something that pulsed at the center of the room, a dense knot of mist, dark and writhing, leaking tendrils of shadow across the floor. Harrow could only stare as Dr. Crisp took one step inside. The mist reached for him. In an instant, Crisp's body convulsed, twisted backward with a sickening pop, pop, pop of dislocating joints. His scream was wet and gurgling, quickly choked off as his body turned inside out, skin sloughing away in steaming folds, organs dangling like grotesque decorations. By the time Harrow stumbled back, bile rising in his throat, all that remained of Crisp was a slick, glistening mass, slowly being devoured by the mist, piece by piece. The spinning instruments fell with a clatter. The mist retracted into itself with a sucking sound, leaving only silence and the stink of burnt meat. Harrow backed away slowly, pulse hammering in his ears. He clutched the book of smoke tighter against his chest. Somewhere deep inside him, a small, rational voice whispered the awful truth. This was only the beginning. Chapter 5. The fog deepens. The fog swallowed London whole. By nightfall, it was no longer a mist, no longer even weather. It was a wall, dense and breathing, oozing through the alleyways like sewage-made flesh. Inspector Harrow stalked through the streets with the book of smoke clutched under his coat, revolver heavy at his hip. He barely recognized the city. The lamps gave no comfort. Their light hung trapped inside tiny glass prisons, swallowed by the endless gray. Shouts echoed in the distance, thin and muffled. A scream cut through the gloom, high and wet. Then silence. The deeper Harrow walked into Whitechapel, the less the streets made sense. Corners bent impossibly. Doors opened into brick walls. Houses leaned over him like giant, rotted teeth ready to snap shut. He passed a crumpled figure, slumped against a lamppost. A man, shriveled and pale, mouth frozen open in a final, silent shriek. His eyes had liquefied, black tears staining his cheeks. No wound, no violence. It was as if he had simply been drained of being. The fog curled greedily around Harrow's ankles, coiling higher with every step. He pressed onward, following a sound, a low, rhythmic thudding, like a giant's heartbeat. It led him to an abandoned courtyard, ringed by broken statues so ancient they were unrecognizable. In the center stood a figure. At first Harrow thought it was a man, but as he approached, details unraveled. The figure was too tall, its limbs too thin, joints bending slightly wrong as if its bones were made of rope. Skin was gray, mottled with patches of dark, oily sheen. Where a face should have been, there was only a mass of spiraling mouths, endlessly opening and closing, whispering in a language that scraped against Harrow's sanity. The thing shuddered, sensing him. Its head, if it could be called that, twisted toward him. From its shifting mass of mouths came a single, gasping word. Harrow. The world tilted. For a heartbeat, Harrow was no longer standing on cobblestones, but dangling in an endless black void, held aloft by unseen threads. Memories drained from him like water from a cracked barrel. His mother's voice, his first case, the smell of rain on old stone, all sliding away. The book of smoke burned hot against his chest, dragging him back. He staggered, revolver out, sight wavering. The thing lurched toward him, movement wrong, as if reality bent to accommodate it. Harrow fired. The bullet struck it dead center. The creature exploded, not in blood, but in a plume of thick, black smoke that howled as it dispersed into the fog. The silence that followed was deeper than death. Harrow dropped to one knee, panting. Sweat poured down his face despite the cold. He knew what the book had said was true now. The fog wasn't hiding them. The fog was them. And London was already dying. Something at the edge of the courtyard moved. A flicker. A ripple. Their figures, tall and boneless, shifting closer, circling. Harrow stumbled back, clutching the book tighter. He realized the awful truth. Killing them didn't matter. They were just the harbingers. The real horror was still coming. Chapter 6. The Cult Beneath. The city rotted from the inside. Everywhere Harrow turned, the signs were there, wrongness blooming like mold. Windows boarded from the inside, churches abandoned mid-sermon, dogs howling at walls that wept black slime. The fog seeped into everything, and still people vanished. By now, Harrow knew, not everyone feared it. Some had invited it in. He first heard whispers of the Order of the Blind God from a drunk priest who hung himself an hour later, tongue swollen and purple. Secret society old as London's bones who worshipped what lay in the mist. Their promises were simple. Shed your flesh, become pure thought, live forever. The cult met beneath the city, in tunnels older than Roman stone. Sewers where the walls sweated and the floors pulsed underfoot like diseased muscle. Harrow found the entrance through the hints in the Book of Smoke. An abandoned abattoir near Rotherhithe Docks, the floor hatch hidden beneath heaps of rotting meat. He climbed down alone, revolver in one hand, lantern in the other. The descent felt endless. The tunnel walls narrowed and breathed. Whispers rode the damp air, words without language, ideas without sanity. Finally, the tunnel opened into a cavern. The order was already there. Dozens of figures knelt before a crude altar, their bodies wrapped in bloody cloth, their faces hidden by hoods sewn with blindfolds. Before them stood a priest, tall, skeletal, arms spread wide. He wore no hood. Harrow recognized him instantly. Chief Inspector Charles Winthrop, his own superior, his mentor, smiling, mouth stretched far too wide. My son," Winthrop intoned, voice echoing off the slimy walls. "You have come to us. You have been chosen." Harrow raised his pistol. Winthrop laughed. "You cannot kill what has already been unmade." He gestured to the altar. There, bound in chains of knotted hair and wire, lay a body. The missing homeless woman, Elsie Mott. But she was wrong. Now her skin stretched thin, symbols carved deep into her belly, black mist bleeding from her nose and mouth. The cult began to chant. The words battered Harrow's mind, low, droning syllables that scraped his thoughts raw. The fog thickened, pouring down through cracks in the ceiling, filling the cavern like rising floodwater. Winthrop's form shimmered, first doubling, then tripling, then folding inward like a grotesque origami of flesh. From the heart of the altar something vast stirred. A limb emerged, if it could be called that. A coiled mass of smoke and bone, ending in dozens of black, weeping mouths. Harrow fired. The bullet passed through Winthrop as though he were smoke. The cultists turned as one, faces still hidden, but Harrow could feel their gazes, hungry and vast, pressing against his skin. The fog screamed. Harrow stumbled back, vision blurring, the book of smoke burning hotter than ever under his coat. He turned and ran, fled through the tunnels, chased by whispering, reaching tendrils of mist that tasted his thoughts as he passed. He didn't stop until he burst into the freezing air of the river docks, the Thames black and heaving beneath him. Above, the stars blinked, not in familiar constellations, but in patterns that twisted and writhed, forming shapes no sane mind could recognize. The city was lost. The cult was deep, and the blind god was waking. Chapter 7. Mind Betrayal. The city was a corpse. Harrow stumbled through it, like a rat trapped in a sinking ship. Streets twisted underfoot, shifting when he wasn't looking. The air itself pressed down, heavy with invisible fingers, plucking at his thoughts like a butcher peeling meat from bone. He had one ally left, or so he thought. Detective Abigail Rook, sharp, stubborn, uncorrupted. Or so he prayed. He found her waiting at the Black Swan Tavern, huddled in a back booth where the gaslights barely reached. Her face was pale, eyes rimmed with red. "They're everywhere," she whispered as he slid into the seat across from her. Jurists, judges, priests, even the bloody milkman, they served the fog now. Harrow nodded grimly. He showed her the book of smoke, laid it flat between them. "There's still a way," he said. His voice was hoarse, the words tasting wrong in his mouth. "The book speaks of a place, beneath London, an anchor stone. If we can destroy it—" He didn't finish. The tavern door swung open. No one stood there. Only the fog, thick and coiling, slithered inside, worming across the floorboards toward them. Abigail's hand moved under the table. For an instant, Harrow relaxed, until he felt the cold steel of her pistol press against his ribs. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Tried to fight it, truly I did. Harrow met her eyes and saw the rot inside her. Her pupils were wrong, not round but spiraled, slowly turning inward like drains sucking away light. She was no longer Abigail Rook. She was a vessel, a mouthpiece for the thing beyond the fog. The mist thickened around them, filling Harrow's nostrils, sliding down his throat. Voices, his own voice, whispered in his ears, "You are already ours. You bring us. You dream us. You are nothing without us." Harrow moved, faster than thought. He drove his elbow into Abigail's wrist, knocking the gun aside. It fired once, the shot shattering a glass behind the bar. She shrieked, but it wasn't a human sound. It was the shriek of something crawling out of a dead woman's skin. The fog surged, grabbing at him with hands that weren't hands. Harrow snatched up the book and ran, smashing through the back door into the choking streets. Behind him, he heard her voice, no longer Abigail's, roaring after him. "The mind eats itself. The city is a body. The body is hunger." His vision blurred. The streets peeled away. The sky cracked like brittle paper, revealing a heaving mass of eyes and mouths and endless corridors of teeth beyond the stars. Harrow fell to his knees. The book burned against his chest, a brand, a curse, a key. He fought to focus, to remember himself. One thought kept him anchored. The anchor stone. He had to find it, had to destroy it, before London became nothing but a dream in the mouth of something far older and far, far hungrier. Chapter 8. The City Falls. The city was screaming, not with voices, but with its stones, its bricks, its very bones. Harrow stumbled through the wreckage, the book of smoke clutched to his chest like a dying man's rosary. The streets twisted under his feet, shivering like wounded animals. Buildings bed in on themselves, windows blinking like eyes trying to cry. A change befall where the sky peeled open, revealing the impossible. A writhing mass of mouths and tendrils, tongues as wide as rivers, speaking in thoughts rather than sounds. London was dying, or worse, transforming. He reached the place described in the book, an ancient pit hidden beneath the ruins of Blackfriars Abbey. The anchor stone sat at the bottom, not a stone at all but a black heart, the size of a carriage, pulsing and steaming with foul life. Tendrils of mist coiled from it, snaking upward into the city above. He saw faces in that mist, thousands, millions, some he recognized, friends, enemies, strangers. Or, screaming without mouths. The Alad spoke to him, not in words, but in memories. His mother's deathbed smile, his first love's kiss, the smell of rain on cobblestones. He'd offered them back, all of them, if he surrendered. Harrow dropped to one knee, the weight of the offer crushing him. He could be whole again. He could have peace. But then he saw London again, truly saw it. People staggering blind through streets of flesh. Children with hollow sockets where their dreams had been. The fog knitting itself into their bones. He rose. He pulled the book of smoke from his coat, opened it to the final page. Taper. A page written in blood, not ink. A page that bled when touched. He spoke the last words. The anchor stone shuddered. A scream, vast enough to tear mountains, ripped through the earth. The heart convulsed, once, twice, and burst, sprang the walls with black ichor that hissed and steamed. The tendrils recoiled. The fog screamed. For a moment, London reappeared, battered, broken, but real. Harrow smiled. Then he saw the cracks. The sky above him split like old leather. Beyond it, not darkness, but endless, writhing light, a place without time, without form. The fog hadn't just been the problem. The fog had been the Theo, and now he had broken it. From the gaping wound in the sky, a hand the size of the tower itself began to emerge, a hand of spirals, of bone and fire and thought, reaching for the broken city. Harrow laughed, a short, bitter sound. In the end, there had never been a chance. He dropped the book. He closed his eyes, and he let the fog take him.